Cool. So as I was just summarizing, I see that there have been discussions last week in issues and also in the document about generally what we want to do at the end somewhere, but I'm not understanding how are we going to get to that end from this point right now. So I wanted to kind of just chat with the two of you to see your understanding and your ideas. And I think Henry might be frozen a tiny bit.
My internet connection is bad. Is it better now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's I need to go over to my phone maybe. But I put some notes into the working group doc just for this meeting because
Awesome,
I think I thought through all of this, and I think there are a few things which are making it fairly easy to decide right now. I mean, we have hard facts, like we have this constraint of, let's say, $80K per month as a budget. Then one hard fact is the cheapest solution to everything is storage that we know. Another hard fact is if you would use disk snapshots for restoring, then that would always be way below, above 1 hour for RTO target. And if we want to provide something better for premium customers, then we need to work on a sync solution, right? And even if we don't decide about the solution right now, I think what we always will come to as work that is needed is that we need to build a scaled down copy of gprod. There's no way around it because we need to make things be working there, and if we need to scale up, it needs to work like a real gprod. So it always needs to be something like that. So this work needs to be done anyway. Then we need to build infra automation around failing over, failing back, orchestrating all of this and scaling up and down. This always will be needed as work. And we need to work that we support deployments on the secondary side without database migrations probably, but still. And we need to think about how we can test this. And this is work that we know right now, I think that needs to be done at least.
Regardless of all the targets we have, right?
Yes, so that's clear. And then if we look into this business goal of supporting a below 1 hour RTO target for premium customers, then we need to build something which is synchronizing GitLab directly over to the secondary side. Disk snapshots are not good enough for that one. So we either need to use Geo or set up a streaming from dedicated GitLab shards or something like that. And that always means we need support for selectively syncing or putting customers on selected GitLab nodes by plan, right? This application feature needs to be there, else we can't do that. So this is also noun work that needs to be done before we can start with that. And as a last thing I noticed is, which is nice, using disk snapshots, it would be super cheap to achieve something at least very shortly, because even if we increase the frequency of disk snapshots, we only pay for the incremental size of snapshots. And if you have it at higher frequency, then the increments will get smaller. So we will stay below 10K additional echoes, even if you do it every half hour, I estimate. So that would be a very cheap solution of building something for all customers. But then we would have the problem of being the database and the GitLab shards being out of sync when we fail over. So that's the big downside of that one. Any other solution for everybody would be something with, I don't know, an event-based system for everything, or object storage in GitLab, ideally. But I think that's where we are right now.
It's a good summary.
Yeah, it's a great summary.
Ideally, I feel like we need to maybe test a few of these options, especially the disk snapshots, because I'm going to hedge a bet there's some underlying infrastructure issues that we're going to have to deal with in the first place to determine whether or not that's even a viable solution. You know, we brought down a database system because we did a snapshot that was live. You know, that was a mistake on our part, but all of our file servers are technically live objects. If we do a live snapshot, we risk doing something bad to a specific repository potentially.
So we would have
There's
inconsistent file systems or something like that. So we would have problems, but it's the cheapest and easiest and fastest solution to get something up until September. That's what I'm saying. But maybe it's not feasible because of too many problems. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the first thing I wouldn't focus on is achieving the RTO and RPO targets. Like that is so far off right now that on at this moment for the technical work we need to do, I don't think we should constrain ourselves for the stuff we want to do immediately. For the stuff that we need to plan and get others to participate in, that needs to happen in parallel, right? So one track is going to be standing up the sites, standing up like and playing what can be done with the things we have right now, even if they're slow, even if they are not optimized, even if they are going to take hours, if not days to complete. That is okay while things are being built in the background, right?
So perhaps we should focus our efforts on, because we have support from Geo to stand up a secondary site using the Git tooling. So we could focus our efforts in that realm and at least getting everything stood up and ready to go. And at that point, it's just maybe we could start testing some of these other items, such as the snapshot recovery option, just to see where that lands, what is required for it, and what we would need to maybe mount that to servers that are stood up in that area. That way it's not something we're duplicating the information on the secondary site. But like, I don't know what that looks like, because you're going to have a file server that's not syncing data. And then we say, hey, remount it with this data. And all of a sudden you have data available to you. And then it's a weird thing, but I think it's at least worth looking into.
I guess that's the first thing we want to find out. How does GitLab behave when the data is not there? The Git data is not there. I mean, we expect that the database replication is working, that object storage is going to be operational in one way or another.
I would think that we just don't have any Git nodes. On the other side, we just have database replication. And in case of failover, we spin everything what is needed up and mount the disk that we create from snapshots. So there would be no working GitLab site on the other side, and there's no Geo involved in this. It's just database replication and infrastructure which can be scaled up on demand, and automation to get the disk snapshots built into a disk and mounted into the right servers.
That would be an interesting thing to test, to see how quickly stuff like that converges.
Yeah, I mean, it will take time to get all the servers up, and this amount of servers, and also a high amount of disk snapshots. Building this out of that for 60 servers, that can take a long time, maybe, because I know for database disks, which are 1 terabyte, it takes 20 to 40 minutes to build a disk out of a snapshot. So we have 16 terabyte disks for GitLab, so it will be around an hour, I guess. But depending on a lot of things, like from which region we get the snapshot and other things, maybe like how many increments we had on the snapshot. And so we really need to test this timing a little bit. But for an RTO above 1 hour, that's fine, I think. Like if you say we want to be back within 4 hours, I think that should clearly work.
Let's set a target right now. When it comes to our work, like I'm going to suggest it in the working group. Let's set in a target of 24 hours. Because right now we have 0 hours. Yeah. Actually worse. Yeah. Million hours, I guess, is the upper bound. Because we don't really know. So the thing is, like, I really don't want us to focus on like super narrow things right now, because we are just not even close to, right? Like we're already talking, how are we going to ski down the mountain while we are still on the beach, hundreds of kilometers away, you know?
I mean, that's why I think we can clearly do the work that anyway needs to be done, which is standing up a new infrastructure in a different region and working on automation to scale this up and down as needed. And then we can find the solution to sync the data. And I mean, that's just, we can leave this out for now and work on this.
Now, what I am curious about though, and that's why I want to have a conversation now with the two of you and not with the whole group. Let's do a bit of playing here. let's say I say we're not going to do any of the disaster recovery working group work, but we're going to focus on the Kubernetes migration. And we're going to focus on moving the API nodes and the web nodes, and then have the Kubernetes handling the actual scale up and scale down. So in that case, let's say in that hypothetical, we have everything but Gitly, Redis, and Postgres in Kubernetes. If we, at that point, after we have migrated that, have a secondary site with VMs for data stores, right? But a single Kubernetes cluster for like a cold cluster, basically, right? Like waiting for something to happen. Would that mean less work for us to actually stand up a bunch of those nodes up? Or does it mean it's pretty much the same amount of work?
I would say it's the same.
Because I think it's worth testing.
Yeah, I mean, it will help for the future for sure. But I mean, if we need to, we need to get all the basics up, like all the secrets and credentials and service accounts and all these little details. And if we build it for a Kubernetes cluster or for a bunch of VMs, it anyway will be a lot of work, right? I mean, having it in Kubernetes would be nice for scaling up and down and everything, and having it more similar to what we plan for gprod anyway. But I think the work amount will not be much less.
Okay,
I guess.
I think,
right, John?
So from my viewpoint, I think spinning up a Kubernetes cluster and running a Helm install is far faster than telling Terraform to build us X amount of machines. We're limited, we're bound by the time that it takes GKE to spin up a cluster, which is within 10 minutes, whereas spinning up a single VM takes roughly 10 minutes. I would hedge a bet that spinning up a cluster and getting Kubernetes or getting GitLab going on that cluster is quicker. But I think it's worth testing.
So, and then we're talking here, right? Like we're not making any decisions here. So let's say in this hypothetical that we decide to say that Gitly is also in Kubernetes. Gitly itself, right? The storage is somewhere else. It could be, on persistent volumes. It could be, I don't know, wherever. But Gitly has the option of you saying, hey, my storage is somewhere else over the network or whatever else. Would that help at all with the speed of the testing and the work? So let's say hypothetically we go and build a secondary site with a cluster, with a Kubernetes cluster. The only thing that is VMs is Redis and the database. We say to Gitly on our secondary site, hey, read from our storage somewhere out over there.
I think that we have two different things here. I mean, one thing is for sure we can be faster in scaling something up and down once we have it in Kubernetes, as John said. But I think the amount of work to get there
I know what you're saying.
much different, right? I mean,
right.
Because if we spin up just via Terraform, which we just can copy over and do some adjustments from the existing Terraform, or if we spin up a Kubernetes cluster, it always means that we need to set something up, get configurations right, and test it. And so I think it will always be some amount of work, and I think there will be not such a big difference.
Right, but there is a difference, Henry. There is a difference in how much work it is to actually move from the moment where you actually have something to test to the moment where you actually have the number, right? Like the RTO and RPO going down. So it is because it's the same amount of work, right? Like, okay, let me try to explain a bit. So let's go back to the original plan. Everything is VM on the secondary site, right? So we are going to build one API node. We're going to build, I don't know, 5 Gitly nodes. We're going to build, I don't know, a couple of Sidekick nodes, or I don't know exactly what we are going to run there. So that will require a lot of infrastructure work, right? Everything you listed. connecting the secrets, syncing, whatever else is necessary there. And by the time we finish, we'll be able to say, all right, we have this 24-hour target that we can play with. Now, getting down the target is going to be much harder because by the time we fail over and then scale up and restore and do all of that stuff, it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort to get things done. But if we play the hypothetical and say that a secondary site is majority Kubernetes, so the scale up itself is fast enough. So the only thing we need to focus is the storage itself. Then you have only one item to focus on, and that item is figuring out how to restore from a snapshot, right? Or focusing how to restore on the snapshot, while the rest is basically just waiting for that. So you kind of removed and moved the focus only on one thing instead of 5 different things that need to happen at the same time. So for that secondary option of Kubernetes, the build out cost is still the same. I agree with you, like you still need to connect a lot of these things, but you get to a point of where you can play with the numbers, right? Like the RTO and RPO target, you get to that option much quicker from the moment you have the build out done.
Yeah, I get you now. So yeah, that's true. I mean, the further we are with our Kubernetes integrations, the easier it will be for us for a secondary side too, and it will be less work to adjust to coming changes to our infrastructure. That's true.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about exactly what we need to build out. We need to build out the database cluster one way or another. We are absolutely sure of that, right? We need to build out a Redis setup, whatever way we are building it, whether it's HA, a single HA cluster, or 3 clusters like we have in production. We need to figure that one out. That is not going to happen overnight. That needs to happen anyway. So those are the common things for Kubernetes and for VMs. So if we focus on starting that build out with whatever we agreed on, the sizing of the VMs, the automation that needs to happen, that will give us enough work for probably a week or 2 to get those things up and running. The next thing that we can do then, in parallel, you're doing the API migration, right? So the next thing we can do is play a bit with GitLab and figure out, like I'm talking about like a test node somewhere. You have some data on a test node, stand up a Kubernetes cluster with GitLab inside and try to connect it to whatever storage is out there and just see how difficult, snapshots. See how difficult it is to actually get that done. If it's only a configuration change, that gives us step number 3, which is, all right, we need to make a decision whether we are going down the VM route or the single cluster route. And that allows us to build out whatever we need there, all the configuration we need there. Like you said, Kubernetes or VMs is going to be the same. You just place it in a different place. And another reason why I'm suggesting this thing for consideration, this is for both you, Skarbek, and Henry, is I know that you're having problems with Chef and Omnibus reconfigures and Geo in that whole thing, right? Like one is overriding another, and it's really hard to connect all of those things. I wonder how much easier this gets when we remove Chef out of the equation. Because if we built everything out in the Kubernetes cluster, theoretically, it could be a bit simpler.
I will say that we have an open issue inside the GitLab board because we don't have it documented how to do a failover for Geo if everything is Kubernetes. Like if you have 2 Kubernetes GitLab instances as Geo, there's no documentation as to how to perform a failover. I suspect I know how to do it based on reading up on the configurations and the work I've been doing recently. And I don't think it's as easy as running a simple rake task. But I do think it'll be a lot faster because there's a lot less nodes that need to be touched. And instead, we're just touching a massive configuration, which touches the entire cluster natively, which will roll everything that's necessary quickly.
Handles the orchestration itself. Yeah.
Precisely. The orchestration is the important part because we are missing that inside of the Omnibus multi-node configuration for Geo. So I enjoy us thinking about the Kubernetes route.
And
I still worry about the storage, obviously.
Yeah, and so those are like a couple of different parallel tracks. And then in parallel to all of that, we have the talk with, well, the rest of GitLab basically, which is how are you going to sync that data, right? Like you need to give us, how are you going to sync automatically only only paid customers? So that can happen in parallel, but we already have these couple of tracks that we need to do regardless of the storage story, right?
Yep.
And am I making any sense to you here?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
this is the first time we're working like closely together, so that's why.
Yeah, I mean that really makes it easier because I mean for instance, we have this effort right now that the Geo team is trying to get up a stand up a Get a new Geo cluster and staging with Get, right?
Yeah.
But this wouldn't help us at least for anything because we can't use Get to stand up a secondary site because it's not usable for our deployments and everything else. And so it maybe helps the Geo team to test some things, but it's not related to standing up a DR site really.
It does help. It does help with that last part of the story that I just mentioned, which is, right, like if they stand up a secondary site right now on staging, that allows us to actually talk with them and the rest of the teams, Gitali and so on. How are you going to sync smaller portions of data? And us to get the practice of now failover, how does the application behave? Now failover, how does the application behave? So this is on a tiny bit of a different level. So there is a level of infrastructure where you do the failover, you do all of that stuff. So that practice is going to become a bit useless. But the level above of how does the application behave? What kind of testing gaps do we have? What kind of feature gaps do we have? That is still going to be useful for that part of the work. You know what I mean? Like it's just.
Yeah, I think in parallel, it could help to get something tested already. Just that we are missing a lot of features like no Kubernetes, I think, in Get, right?
No. Getting Kubernetes. Yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon for us, at least right now.
Yeah.
But we can always be the ones providing feedback and saying, look, if you want us to use Get, we need this to stand up a cluster easily. We have that right now. We can do that relatively simply. But if you want us to use Get, then go.
Grant is actively working on trying to make Get bring up a Helm cluster with GitLab running inside of it.
So based on the tracks I just explained, basically, by the time we get to the point of us deciding for the cluster or not, we might actually even have something to test.
Yeah, true.
The database in Redis we still need to build anyway. So like I said, database Redis we need to figure out and do right now, regardless of everything. That's not in the automation we have, right? Like that we need to do. Secondary site with Get can be booted up so that we can continue practicing failovers now within a different expectation, and that is we need to give direction to product on what we need to see built in order to be able to, right, like replicate only paid customers. And how do we then, once we replicated only paid customers, how do we replicate free customers, right? Like when we stand up on that site and all of that, those questions need to be answered in that work stream. And then by the time we complete Postgres Redis thing, we get the fourth work stream, which is us playing a bit with figuring out how to get Gitali testing done faster, right? In parallel with everything. And the fifth stream will be after we figure out what options we have there, whether we go down the VM route or the Kubernetes cluster route, which then brings us the sixth stream, which is how do we do a failover with Kubernetes, with Geo?
And after that, making it all faster.
And after that, making it all faster, right? Like at that point, we're going to have 24 to 48 hour turnaround time, hopefully. Clunky and breaking and so on. And then we can talk about, all right, so let's figure out how to speed it up.
I enjoyed this approach. Not for this meeting, but I would love to maybe chat more about Redis and see if we could exclude that from the need to build out primarily to start. But I do enjoy this line of thinking. I think this would be a good way to start off the meeting today.
Yeah,
because right now I don't think we've really discussed how we want to approach this at all. and it's been more about trying to figure out our business requirements, but I don't think the business really understands what the consequences are of certain decisions are. And I think until we start testing and showcase what our capabilities are, they'll have a better understanding as to what that looks like in the future. And then we can figure out what we need to do with budgeting at that point. But all this requires testing up front.
Yep. And that's why I also,
which we don't really do yet.
yeah, that's why I also said in that point number 3, we don't have anything right now. So talking about sub 1 hour RTO or, you know, anything below, honestly, between 24 hours is nothing. So
everything's a goal, it's not set in stone at all.
Because it's so clear in my head, these different types of work streams, I'm asking the two of you to write down what we talked about these separate streams, because you writing it down are going to open like so many different questions, and maybe we have to answer them, maybe we don't. But if you are able to explain how we want to parallelize some of this work and who tackles what, when I say who, I don't mean Henry or Skarbek, I mean infrastructure, Geo, GitLab, and so on, product, and so on, then it's going to be much easier for us to have a larger discussion, because if I keep talking all the freaking time, then that's not going to go well.
Makes sense, yeah. Should we put this into an issue? Because I think the document isn't good enough for that.
Please, issue is fine. Just document it, and let's open it up with that. And certainly, just to be clear, I know this is a recorded call. The solution is not great, right? Like, I'm not enjoying the fact that we need to have 6 different work streams to get this done. But at the same time, we have some cost restrictions, we have some time restrictions, and we have some people restrictions, right? Like how much time we can add to this, while all the time thinking, if we slow down on the infra side on this to build the DR, we are actually slowing down the improvement we need to do in our infrastructure that will make us do less of that work. So if we parallelize some of this together with the work we are doing, theoretically, by the time we get to deciding on the clusters and how are we going to do failovers, we might simplify the situation for us significantly.
Yeah, I agree. I also see people resources as the biggest problem here. I mean, everything is so solvable, but without people resources and time, it's really hard.
Yeah, and that's why I also want us to focus on the first 2 steps right now when it comes to what we in infra need to do. Because next week, something might come down the line and say, hey, disaster recovery is number 5 on the list. Which it happens, like it happened before, so I wouldn't. All right, I'll upload this recording and post it in the channel. And yeah, go and create those issues, and ping me if you have anything unclear about what we talked about. Happy to help. Right, need to drop off to the next call.
Okay, see you later.
Thank you, sir.
Chat later. Bye.